Is Jesus God, or was he merely a man? He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. For 30 years, he worked in a carpentry shop. For 3 years, he was a traveling preacher. When the tide of popular opinion turned against him, his friends ran away. He was turned over to his enemies. He was tried, convicted, and nailed upon a cross between two thieves. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave. He never wrote a book. He never went to college. He never held an office. And he never traveled more than 200 miles from the place he was born. He never did any of the things that normally lead to greatness. Yet every army that has ever marched, every king that has ever reigned, and every government that has ever sat has not affected life on this earth as powerfully as he has. 2,000 years later, and the name of Jesus is far more popular than any historic figure to have ever lived. If you Google Jesus, you'll find over 1 billion search results. How is this possible of a peasant man who only had 3 years of ministry 2 millenniums ago? How could he become the most influential figure of all time? Why is even time itself labeled after him? AD and BC. Why can't many people even swear without saying his name? There are virtually no historians who would argue that Jesus did not exist. There are many, however, who argue that Jesus was not God. Jesus' crucifixion is a well-known historical fact, but there is another event which makes the greatest argument for his deity. The resurrection is the single most important event in the history of mankind. If Christ rose from the dead, then he is in fact God. And if he merely died on the cross, while claiming that he would rise 3 days later, his whole ministry was a lie. If one can prove that the resurrection occurred without a shadow of a doubt, then all other arguments can be put to rest. How can we be certain that the resurrection occurred? Watch the evidence of the resurrection video to learn more. Keep in mind, there are many other types of evidence that point to Jesus' deity, including his well-documented miracles that were seen by thousands of eyewitnesses with multiple written accounts, not to mention the Old Testament prophecies, which predicted precisely how and where he would be born, what he would be like, the purpose of his life, and even the method of his death, foretelling that he would be hung from a tree. And this was predicted hundreds of years before the Romans even invented crucifixion, which is mind-boggling. And lastly, not everyone can relate to this, but for those who can, the experiential evidence associated with having a relationship with Jesus in modern day, and even miracles that are still occurring all over the world in his name, are plenty of evidence for his devout followers. Although this evidence is not enough for the average skeptic who hasn't experienced this firsthand. The proof of the resurrection is simply the icing on the cake.